Hey, look at that. The next question is also from Christopher Dale Goodwin. A private space race in the 60s. In all honesty, would a private space race have been as successful in the 1960s as NASA? No, it would have been impossible to do a private space race in the 1960s. Um, the Apollo program was a gigantic government program. It was not, well, you could almost say it was a Soviet style big government program. But first of all, the amount of money that needed to be there was a lot of money. And then the second thing, too, is you had all of these, the command module was built by North American, the service module was built by North American, or North American Rockwell at the time, so maybe it was just Rockwell. Grumman built the LEMs. All of the components were built by different people. And to duplicate that effort would have just put it completely out of reach. It was out of reach anyway. One of the Apollo astronauts said that the moon landing. He said that basically we were there in the 1960s and we reached 50 years into the future, and somehow managed to bring home this landing like 50 years before it would have been like comfortably done. But I say we should be doing that all the time. But that quote from an Apollo astronaut saying we pulled it out of the future is true. It just everything was in the right place at the right time, and I was going to say we got lucky, but we got lucky some of the time. Sometimes not so lucky. We didn't get lucky on Apollo 1, didn't get lucky on Apollo 13. I don't think luck had much to do with it. The the reason we landed on the moon and did it 6 times is because guys like oh my God, Gene Kranz. Failure's not an option. I remember my favorite story from the Apollo program. I think I told this just a week or two ago. When the guys got back in after their moonwalk, which, by the way, if you put the LEM on the pitcher's mound, all of the EVA on Apollo 11 is in the infield, with the exception of one quick trip. Neil Armstrong walked about a third of the way into right field. But all of the first spacewalk was in the infield of a baseball diamond. None of it got outside the clay. But when they did a 2-hour moonwalk, and by the way, they moved the actual walk 6 hours forward. They were going to do it 6 hours later. But they, honest to God, seriously said that, okay, so the first thing that has to happen when these guys get down on the moon and everything's buckled up, first thing they should do is sleep for 8 hours. Yeah, that's it. I am on the moon, and the first thing I want to do is sleep for 8 hours. So it's about 6 hours after the landing they went out. It was supposed to be about 12. What was the question? The lunar modules were the skin on them was as thin as aluminum foil, and they just wanted. I remember my favorite story about the Apollo program. I remember. So the guys are out there for about 2 hours. They come back with some swag, some moon rocks, and some other samples. Nothing like what they brought back on later missions. I mean, they brought half the moon with them back on 15 and 16 and 17. But they had a bunch of bags of samples, and these were all accounted for, and it was supposed to be there. I so say, excuse me. But what's interesting is they're coming in. They're 2 men, grown men in spacesuits in a phone booth, trying to get in there, close the hatch, get out of the suits. Not an easy thing to do, so they accidentally swung one of the sample bags around, and it hit the control console, and it happened to hit and destroy the button that launched the ascent stage, the one button that has to work, the one that pushed the button so that the top of the LEM will go up and back up into lunar orbit, and you can meet with Mike Collins and go home. That button was smashed. They looked at it and they couldn't. They put their finger in it, couldn't touch it. And some journalist interviewed Buzz Aldrin about this later, and said, "So when you realized that the switch was broken, did you did you start to think about what your last words would be, or your final message from the moon? Were you thinking about what you were going to tell your wife and your kids and stuff? And Aldrin looks at her like she's some kind of insect, like just like beneath contempt, even beneath being beneath contempt. And Aldrin just looks at her. He's like, so were you planning your death speech? And he looks at us. No, we were figuring out a way to get the switch to work. And I think what they ended up using was sticking a pen down there. That'll do it, though. Anyway, that's how we end up to the moon, is that kind of attitude.